The heart of academic writing is organizing information. Often we are asked to apply concepts from courses to readings and materials that we have studied. Um, Writing projects in college tend to be a little more complex and involve documentation, giving credit to the sources. And one underestimated part of the writing process is making sure that you understand the assignment. Sometimes you might miss just one or two small elements that actually add up when your instructor is evaluating your work. So, the first step that you want to take before you begin your writing, your first pre writing step, is going to be to really examine the assignment, the prompt, and to develop a checklist based on that prompt. So here we have what is, a very sparse directions. It's just a two sentences that give you all the information and parameters for this assignment. What I generally do is I start by copying that assignment and then pasting it right below. And then I turn this sentence or two into a checklist that I will be able to use to make sure that I'm moving correctly through the process of creating this paper and that I can look at before I submit the paper to make sure that I have in fact met all of the assignments of all the criteria of the assignments. So I like to start by sort of just breaking up the sentences into bullet points. So I can see that it's going to be 800 to 1,000 words, so I'll break it up right there. I can see it's an academic essay, and it's an APA style, and it is an essay. Sometimes you are asked to write different kinds of projects. This is an essay. And I can see that the topic is sadness among American teenagers, and that I'm supposed to use the article provided as a source. So now that I have these bullet points, I'm going to go back and just make sure I understand what each of these means. So, 800 to 1,000 words is pretty straightforward. I do like to make note that each page of writing that's double spaced and formatted appropriately for an academic paper is about 350 to 400 words. So I'm just going to make a note to myself that this is going to be about 2 to 3 pages double spaced. And that lets me, better envision what the paper is going to be like. Now, when I get into this issue of academic, now I have to sort of think, what does that mean? What do I know about academic essays and academic papers? Well, one thing I've learned over, my writing experience is academic usually means that it's going to be based on empirical evidence. And empirical evidence is research, studies, the knowledge of experts. So I know that that's going to be important. And I also know that academic essays shouldn't be based on personal experience. It shouldn't be based on personal opinions. And as a result of that, I know I'm going to be using sources, credible sources. And I know that I'm going to write in the third person. And that means I'm not going to use I or you. I'm going to stick to the he, she, it, they, them point of view. I also know, because it's an academic essay, it's going to follow the academic essay structure, and that means it's going to have an introduction, at least 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion, and it's going to have a thesis statement at the end of the conclusion. So, I understand that those are just some basic aspects of any essay. Now, you might say to yourself, oh, I don't need to write that down, and maybe you don't. But one of the problems that happens as we are working towards writing these more complex papers when we have a lot of other responsibilities going on is we can forget small details, sort of like when you run to the store without a list. You're convinced you won't forget the toilet paper, and then you arrive back home and lo and behold, the thing that you went for, you don't have. So having a checklist ensures that you don't miss these small details, even though you might feel confident that you understand them. Next, we have APA style. And APA style is American Psychological Association style. And it has its own whole set of rules like MLA does. It's a little bit different. It has a cover page. It has specific formatting of the paper, spacing, headings, etc. It has a reference page instead of a works cited page. And all sources are cited within the paper in parentheses. So you want to make sure, regardless if you're writing this essay for our English class or if you're working in your psych class, you want to make sure you pay attention to the documentation system, the style that your instructor requests. And then when you're making your checklist, you're going to be specific about that in your own checklist to remind yourself, right, I'm not writing a works cited paper here. So it's not going to have you're not writing an MLA paper here. So it's not going to have a works cited page. It's going to have a references page. You want to make sure that you take care of those small details. It's an essay, so we already talked a little bit about that. It needs to have those specific parts, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And then here, the topic. And sometimes even though you might begin researching and you might feel confident about this, you want to make sure that you are, in fact, including all of the elements of the assignment. This assignment is about sadness among American teenagers. And sometimes when we start researching or writing, we might get excited about our topic, but we can drift. So, it's not uncommon to find out that suddenly you find yourself writing about anxiety, but that's not what your instructor wanted. Your instructor wanted a paper on sadness. You want to make sure that you're talking about American teenagers. You're not trying to make a global statement in this paper because you are looking at what your instructor is requiring, and then you are going ahead and making sure that you keep the focus narrowed to that. And teenagers, it's easy to drift off topic and start, discussing um, adults or the elderly or college students or children. But in this case, the topic is teenagers. So you want to make sure that you have included all of those items, all of those assigned pieces of the topic in your paper. And finally, you have to use this source, right? So you're asked to use this source. You want to make sure that you are doing that in your paper. So the next thing that I usually do then is I take all of these items and I kind of sort them into a structure that makes sense, right? I group like ideas. So I'm going to do that right now. So now I've rearranged the order of the bullets, and this is not something that you have to worry about, but what I like to do is sort of group them by types. So here is sort of the um, the structural physical parts of the paper that I want to make sure of. So I'm gonna I'm gonna sort of take these, and maybe I'll make these one color. I might make them blue. And then down here, I like to sort of switch over and have the kind of content oriented um, bullet points or criteria. So here I'm just going to take these, and this is, what we talked about before about the parameters of what the content should be like, and sort of the style things that I should be writing in the third person, and that I need to use that specific source, and that it shouldn't be my opinion. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm just going to put that in a different color. And that helps me sort of, remind myself. And then I just like to select the whole thing and turn it into an actual checklist. I even have a little bullet that's a check bullet that I like to use. And then I now have this in place, this checklist, so that before I begin my essay, I've really wrapped my head around the assignment. I really have a picture in my mind about what I need to do. Just making the list helps me remember. And, much like when you go to the grocery store with a list, I have an idea of, what kind of information I need, how I'm going to set up the document. Just creating the list is going to help me get started with the task. And then, just like before I leave the store, I double check my list. Before I submit my paper, I'll go back and double check my checklist to make sure that I have, in fact, met all the requirements of the essay assignment. So that is what I mean when I say that at the beginning of the first step in creating a solid academic paper, a successful paper, is creating a checklist for yourself that you can refer back to make sure that you are staying on track and that you've completed all the parameters of the assignment.